Good morning and welcome to our visitors who are joining us on Zoom for our June 3 and 30. And we are so delighted to have you. I am Lou Lanyo. I'm the Education Programs Manager. And I'm excited that we have Jeffrey Allison, our Director of Statewide Programs and Exhibitions, and our Paul Mellon Collection Educator. Thank you, Jeffrey, for joining us. It's the title, which I love, is A Horse, of course, Equine Art in the Paul Mellon Collection. So Jeffrey, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much and welcome everyone. And as Lulon said, I'm Jeffrey Allison and I'm the Director of Statewide Programs and Exhibitions. And I've been the Paul Mellon Collection Educator here at the museum for about 27 years. And so I always love the opportunity to share works from that collection with folks. And we had a lot of fun up in the galleries on Tuesday. One of the benefits of doing it virtually is that I can sneak in a couple of additional images supporting what I really want to talk about today. So I'll get off my name because you've all memorized it, I'm sure, and start with the first image. Let's see. There we go. And we're going to start with George Stubbs. What we're really going to look at today are three incredibly innovative artists from different time periods and how they looked at the horse. And we're going to start with George Stubbs. And as we'll see a little bit later on, the first equine painting that Paul Mellon ever purchased was a George Stubbs, not this one, but another one that I'll show you. And George Stubbs is basically considered to be the greatest British sporting artist. And he made a tremendous number of equine paintings for a lot of wealthy patrons. This is Shark with his trainer Price, dated 1775, but there's some question it could be painted as late as 1794. Shark has a remarkable history. And I mean, it goes to the point of why Paul Mellon chose the works that he donated to the VMFA and all these beautiful works that hang in the Mellon Wing that opened in 1985. And Shark was the winningest horse in England at the time, both in terms of the number of races it won and also the largest purse. But as we all know, owners of thoroughbreds who race don't make all of their money because they're winning money at races. It's when you put the horse out to stud, right? And they had a problem with Shark. When Shark retired from racing, he had no interest in anything but eating the food that his trainer Price is feeding him here. Absolutely zero interest. They went, oh my God, what are we going to do? They said, everyone in Europe will probably know about this by now. What about those bloody Yanks? And so they actually sold Shark to two partners in equine business, and he was shipped over, and he got off the ship in Norfolk, Virginia, and he looked around and he looked at the beautiful Commonwealth blue sky, and he smelled the sweet Virginia breeze, and he saw all of these American horses, and his interest was renewed. And they took him to a plantation that's actually between Richmond and Fredericksburg. And he lived out his days very happily and was one of the foundation thoroughbreds in the United States, produced many winners of many horse races, and his descendants continue to win races today. What's wonderful about this is this painting was done in England when he was still winning those awards and races. And Paul Mellon purchased it, brought it back to Virginia, and ultimately placed it here at the VMFA, about 35 to 40 miles from where Shark would have lived, and created this collection. And it's an exciting collection if you really start to look at it. We think of it as a teaching collection, and it's always fun to teach and talk about things like that. And there's a self-portrait of George Stubbs. And I should mention that he's completely self-taught, as many of the artists we talk about are from that time period. And one of the things that he did, he grew up, his father was involved in the horse trade, and again, is self-taught. And he taught himself the anatomy of the horse by dissection, which is very important. I don't think it pleased his neighbors too much that he was hanging these horse carcasses up and sort of dissecting them layer by layer and sketching and drawing. And ultimately, he produced a book that is a comparative anatomy. There's horses, there are humans, there are cats, including big cats like tigers, and there's also birds, including chickens. And particularly the anatomy of the horse is still used in art schools today to train people on how to draw a horse, which is one of the hardest things to do. One of the remarkable things about him is he also observed horses in nature and was able to take those dissections and create these drawings, not just in a still moment like he would have seen them, but he actually translated that and shows horses, the skeletal areas in all sorts of different motions. So he was very innovative. Let's see. There we go. And there is George Stubbs' Pumpkin with Staple Ad from 1774. You'll notice that these paintings are very similar, and that's because the patrons that asked for these sorts of commissions wanted to really display the horse in a very specific way. It's a very traditional way of looking at it. Their paintings would have been created to hang in country homes, on estates, and really something to brag about. George Stubbs had a son, George Townley Stubbs, who created prints of his father's paintings. And so people like you and I perhaps could own the print if we weren't wealthy enough to own the original painting. And this is Paul Mellon at Rookby Stables in Upperville, Virginia. And it's an interesting thing. Once Bunny Mellon passed away, Rookby Stables is at Oak Springs, their home. And those stables were turned into guest suites and meeting rooms. And so you could theoretically spend the night in the stable where one of his champion racehorses might have spent their life. Stubbs got in trouble, and I think that's the fun connection between these three artists. And he did the thing that you should never do as an artist. He created a beautiful painting for a patron, and the patron hated it. He didn't like the way, because it was less traditional than this one. And so he wouldn't pay him. So Stubbs sued him and won. And that's not a very good thing if you live on commissions, because once you have sued and won, no one wants to hire you in case they don't like the painting, knowing that you might sue them. So he turned to history paintings, paintings of people bringing in crops and things, celebrating really the strength of Britain and the people who keep it running by creating the food, etc. So the next artist I want to look at is in the French equine art collection, and it's Edgar Degas. And we think of Degas as having painted many different things. Obviously, there are the race course scenes, but we really think about the little dancer that he created originally in wax, and all the portraits, the dance scenes, etc., the street scenes, the people in cafe bistros. Here's a great portrait of him as a young man. We usually think of him as old and grumpy, I think, so I wanted to show him when he was younger. He only displayed one sculpture in his lifetime, and that was the famous Little Dancer. And people hated it. Everyone hated it. The critics hated it. They said, how dare you? How dare you represent the great tradition of Paris ballet and Paris opera house with this dance rat? And someone else said, she looks like a frog. And of course, if you think about today, even if you think about the Nutcracker and all the little girls that are running around that are part of that production, they're still called dance rats. That's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just what they're called. What they really were responding to was the fact that she was a young dancer, part of the group, not the star. And more importantly, that he placed on that sculpture real materials. The dance skirt is real material. The ribbon in her hair, real material. So he continued to create these sculptures of horses and dancers throughout the rest of his life, particularly as he grew older and he had so many troubles with his eyesight. He became incredibly sensitive to light. He could no longer go outside really to the races. He couldn't even go to the Paris ballet because the light was too intense. So he would bring people into his studio and have them pose. He continued to work on these models, these wonderful sculptures in wax. And he was completely self-trained. And the armatures inside these, we've x-rayed them all, and they're remarkable. And you can see the earliest ones are really complicated and kind of clunky, but he really taught himself how to make much more fluid armatures. And at the end, they're so beautiful. The x-ray looks like a line drawing, a hand gesture. When he passed away, the executors, which included Renoir, were sort of surprised and excited to find that in addition to all the work they knew about, they also found this cache of photographs, beautiful photographs that he had made, and all of these wax sculptures. And there was an argument. Someone said, you know, he never wanted these to be displayed in the public. We should destroy them. Someone else said, no, I think he always wanted them to be cast in bronze. And the voice of reason in the group said, my God, they're Degas. We're not going to destroy them. So a lot of them were deteriorating. He didn't really take good care of them. So they brought in a master, a Mouillet bronze artist, who repaired as many as he could and then cast them in editions. The thing about, again, what Paul Mellon did here at the VMFA is that when you come to the galleries, you can take a look at the original wax and many other materials. And it's on this wooden stand. And I think it has that freedom of motion that you can see. When you look at the same thing, once it has been cast in bronze, to me, those horses' feet are always planted. You know, it is part of that base, and it just doesn't seem to have the same life to it. There's always a question about Degas and the waxes and the bronzes. People say if you find a bronze and it's supposed to be an Edgar Degas, you can tell it's authentic because you see his fingerprints in it. That's false. If you see fingerprints, they're the fingerprints of the bronze artist who repaired the waxes. So that's an interesting clue to think about. When you do come to the museum, I want you to do something. I don't want you to set the alarm off, but if you don't get too close and you glance up the dance skirt of another dancer across the gallery from the little dancer, you'll actually see all of the materials that he was grabbing as he was trying to fill this dance skirt out. And there's a piece of paper with his handwriting on it. And there are also wine corks in there. So he really was, you know, a very modern artist. I always think of the fact that Picasso and Degas lived in Paris and worked at the same time. Degas didn't die until 1917. And, you know, for most of the time Picasso was there. During that time period, I would argue that it was really Degas who was the more modern artist, because he was expanding his use of materials. He was combining things. He was making monoprints and taking the ghost print and then painting on it and drawing on it and really creating all sorts of things in depth. So it's a fun conversation to have anyway. And then the third artist I want to look at is Alfred James Munnings, Sir Alfred James Munnings. And here is the Belvoir point-to-point meeting on Barrowby Hill, 1920-21. And Munnings lived into the mid to late 1950s, but he is the more modern artist that we're looking at. He grew up with sort of a ragtaggle childhood. He actually would go off and travel with gypsies as a young child and continued to do that even when he became a very successful and famous artist. He would just disappear for times, and he loved to go rambling in the woods. And one day he was walking with his dog, and he picked the dog up to move it across a hedge. And if you think about British hedges, they're filled with prickles. And as he moved the dog across, a branch came back and hit him in the eye. And he was blinded in that eye for the rest of his life. And he tried to join the army in World War I, and they said, well, you only have one eye that you can see out of, so you can't. So he became a trainer of soldiers on horseback. And he started making these paintings. And after the war, the captains, the lieutenants, the generals, who were all, of course, wealthy, they all started hiring him and giving him commissions. And he became incredibly famous, both for his horse paintings and for his landscapes. I like this particular painting because it really combines those two ideas of looking all the way out to the distance. And I hope you can see it. I wish I could point it. There is a little trickle of white cloud toward the very background, and that's actually a train, a steam engine going across far, far in the background. And I think about how when you lose an eye, you also lose the ability to have depth perception. So he had to retrain himself to create this wonderful sense of depth within this painting. And it's kind of fun that the person who gave him this commission said, "Don't worry, Alfred. Take as long as you want. These are all my friends. This is my country home. We have plenty of food. We have plenty of wine. We have plenty of liquor. And we can come out every day if needed and pose for you. Take your time." And it always reminds me of Bertie Wooster and that whole idea of sort of mythical idea of people going out to a country home and spending an entire summer or whatever. Munnings ultimately became the president of the Royal Academy. And here he is standing out there. There's the horse that he's doing the portrait of and the horse's trainer, and standing out there with his bow tie. And Munnings also got in trouble. In 1949, he was the outgoing president at the Royal Academy of the Arts, and there were endless speeches. And Churchill was one of his very best friends, and Churchill was there, and they tippled. As you know, Churchill liked to tipple as well. And by the time he got up to do his speech, it was rambling. He was ranting against modern art. He hated this idea of modern art. He thought it should stay, especially within the Royal Academy, that they should really support and exhibit traditional works of art. And he looked at Churchill and he said, Churchill asked me, "Alfred, if you met that Picasso coming down the street, would you join me in kicking his..." Well, when he said it, he didn't say womp, womp, womp. He actually said the word that we all know what it would be. And the fun thing about this is that, this is 1949. And if you think about the rich tradition of the BBC radio, it broadcast all over the world, not just in England, but around the world. People were listening in Africa. People probably were listening in the United States. And the next day, critics and art historians literally would take history books and they tore Alfred Munnings outside. They tore him out of the history of art, because by 1949, the critics were all supporting modern art. They were all supporting Picasso, certainly. They didn't want Picasso's to drop in any value. So the academicians and the critics literally just turned a blind eye, as it were, on Munnings, while the majority of people who listened to the broadcast actually believed and supported him completely. So he finished out his career painting a lot of beautiful landscapes. And so there's a connection between Stubbs, who should not have sued his patron. There's Munnings, who should not have gotten drunkenly on a worldwide broadcast and talked about modern art. And then in the middle is Degas. And the thing that Degas did is that, first of all, he only displayed that one sculpture because he hated the response that he got. The other thing that he did is that there was a photographer named Edward Muybridge, Scottish-American photographer. And he was hired by Leland Stanford University, former governor of California, to see if he could photograph a horse in motion and prove that a horse's legs were all off the ground at the same time. And he devised a system of putting cameras all the way around a racetrack with a line across from each camera. And the horse ran around. And he first did it with 12 cameras, and he was successful. There was the horse in one photograph, all off the ground. But he continued. And the next time he did it with 24 cameras, and ultimately devised a way to show them in motion on a wall, to project them. And he and Stanford and his wife went on a tour. They went to London and they went to Paris. And when he got to Paris, he went to a fellow photographer, the famous photographer Nadar, who had loaned his studio to the Impressionists for their first exhibition. And he displayed all of these images. And people who went there, such as Degas, were like, oh my God, we have all been painting horses in motion incorrectly. A lot of times you see paintings from that time period, and it's hobby horses. It's impossible for a horse to actually run the way they look in the paintings. And after Muybridge, particularly, everyone changed the entire way that they would depict a horse in motion. Degas was Degas, though. Not only did he change that, but he was notorious for going into people's homes, places that had already purchased a work of art from him, and taking it back off the wall, taking it back to the studio and working on it some more. Basically, Picasso never finished any of his paintings. He was always reworking them, which is a very modern thing to do as well. And particularly with the paintings of horses, he was always knocking on doors saying, I need to adjust this painting. I need to change now that I know more about how these things work. He was also notorious if you bought a painting from him and reframed it. He would go to your home, take it off the wall, put it back in the original frame and say, don't do that again. So all three of these artists are very famous and I think have huge influence within the concept of sporting art. And all three of them were also troublemakers in very different ways. So I hope that you'll come to the museum and visit the Paul Mellon Collection and look at those waxes and up the dance skirt and look at all the other paintings we have by Munnings. They really celebrate equine horses, and particularly his paintings. He has a couple of at the racetrack, and the way he paints the beautiful silks, the different colors, is exciting. And we also have a Degas at the races, where he did 7 sketches while he was at that race, took them back, put them on the wall, combined them into this painting that's sort of a panoramic in a way. And again, he used man-made synthetic pigments. That's what the Impressionists were known for. He went outside and sketched. He didn't paint outside like we think of the Impressionists. Most of them sketched and then brought that in. But the beautiful colors in those silks jumps out at you. So thank you for letting me talk a little bit about sporting art in the Paul Mellon Collection. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks, everybody.